Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here today for our free webinar session presented by Dynamic Point and sponsored by Sabre Limited. I'm also very excited to introduce today's topic, which is Dynamics 365 and Office 365 customer and vendor portals for manufacturers. I'll take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Donna Simonovic, the marketing manager here at Sabre Limited, and our expert presenter today is Mike Marson, Director of Business Development for Dynamic Point. Sabre Limited is located in Cambridge, Ontario, and is an expert in Microsoft Dynamics Business Central ERP implementation and training for the manufacturing industry. Dynamic Point are experts in delivering business apps that provide the greatest level of functionality and flexibility through the utilization of the Office 365 framework. We estimate that today's webinar will take up to 45 minutes of your time. All of our webinars are recorded and loaded onto YouTube. Be sure to go to our Sabre Limited YouTube channel to check out more videos and subscribe to our channel so that you receive the notifications when new content has been added. To ensure the best quality, everyone will be on listen-only mode, but if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and submit those by clicking on the chat icon and then typing your question in the pop-up chat pane, and we'll answer your questions at the end of the session. And now I'd like to hand it over to Mike from Dynamic Point to begin our webinar. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you so much, Donna. I appreciate the introduction. You can see my screen. Everything looks good, right? And I sound okay?
Everything looks great and we can hear you clearly.
Okay, well, we have a lot to cover, so I'll get rolling. So today we are looking at portals for specifically customers and vendors. It could also include employees as well, but we're going to focus on customer and vendor portals using Office 365, specifically looking at some use cases for manufacturing companies. So we'll start off very broad, and then we'll dive down a little bit more details on some specific use cases just for manufacturing organizations. So a quick introduction of who Dynamic Point is, and I guess who's talking to you and what it is that we do here. So Dynamic Point, what we do as an organization is we create apps on top of Office 365. And, to sort of illustrate what that means is the best analogy I've been able to come up with in the years of doing this is it's very similar to developing an app on a mobile phone. And I'm sure we've all installed an app on our mobile phone, right? You go to the App Store and you click on it, of course. And when you do, it asks you these questions of, can this app use your camera, or can it use notification services, or can it use your location, etc. It asks you all these questions, of course, that we just click yes to. And what that app is doing, obviously, is it's leveraging the functionality that's being provided by this platform, whether it be an iPhone or an Android or whatever your flavor. It is, of course, using this functionality being provided by the platform. And that is exactly, what we are doing, but obviously not on Android or an iPhone, but on an Office 365 platform. So we've been around a little bit longer than Office 365, the predecessor of that of BPOS, if you guys remember that back in the day. But we used to create our apps on top of SharePoint, and then about 6 years or so ago, migrated all of our products to the Office 365 framework. So that's who Dynamic Point is and what it is that we do. Of our applications, the one that we're going to focus on today is this top one, our portal application. So we also have a invoice automation as well as employee expense management. We're going to skip those two for today and focus on our portal app. And basically what our portal app does is it enables the sharing of data from an ERP system. We're going to focus on Business Central today because I believe that's most of you. Sharing that information using an Office 365 SharePoint extranet. So those of you who are familiar with SharePoint, it's a product that's been around a long time. It used to be on premise. The primary focus of it was for sharing information within your organization, right? Building intranets and putting documents and, everything from what's in the cafeteria for lunch today and everything else. And Microsoft with Office 365 has, I wouldn't say changed that focus, but maybe expanded that focus to include using this platform to share information with external parties as well, namely customers and vendors. And to enable that, a very powerful thing that they provided is this concept of an external license or a guest license, which is, I was going to say free. Free is probably not the right word. It's included with your subscription and they're unlimited. So you could share a Office 365 SharePoint extranet with as many customers or vendors as you want, and it does not require a license. So the fact that Microsoft has provided that has now opened up this tool to be much more of an external collaboration platform than just an internal one. So that's what we're going to focus on today. As far as an objectives of a portal, they vary. And if I do my job today, I hope to show you that really the power of the platform as well as our app is that you could share and focus a portal to whatever audience you want and share the information that's applicable to your company. A portal is one of those words that, what does it mean? It means very different things to different people. But just to get you thinking, some common use cases from a customer perspective of why you'd want a portal is such things as sharing company information, contracts, documents, doing order entry so customers can enter orders. Maybe you want them to see inventory, payment processing, a help desk. From a vendor perspective, manage, again, their company information, terms and conditions, look at their POs and edit POs, manage RFPs, confirm shipments. And then from an employee perspective, it's usually more, HR or operational focused. So handbooks, time entry, project management, sharing some insight into company operations, and then reporting. So by no means is this supposed to be an all-inclusive list of, what a portal can be. It's just some general ideas to get you thinking before we start getting into the demonstration. So why Office 365? On my analogy of a mobile phone, right? Like a mobile phone obviously comes with a very powerful platform, the camera, the ability to know where I am, locations and things like that. And Office 365 comes with a very similar in nature platform of functionality and tools, obviously more focused towards businesses, but it comes with a whole suite of products as well that are generally all included with your subscription. So to give you a little lay of the landscape of the ones that we use most commonly, our app is added to SharePoint. So SharePoint is really providing the security, the branding, the framework, the ability to store documents, etc. It is the user interface really for the portal. And in itself is its own content management system, right? I could have web parts, I could include all kinds of content, I could share videos, etc. For the sake of workflow, Microsoft gives this other tool that it's called Power Automate that we can trigger using the portal, right? So anything from a customer views an order or a vendor edits a purchase order, etc., we could kick off a workflow associated that using this Power Automate workflow engine that Microsoft provides. For gathering additional detail and apps, Microsoft provides Power Apps, which is again a configurable app tool, as well as forms. So I'll show you some examples of these when we start getting into like vendor onboarding and other use cases that we'll cover today in our portal demo. And then last but not least, Power BI. Power BI is Microsoft's reporting tool. So it's going to be, responsible for presenting our analytics and our dashboards associated to data. Okay, landscape of the portal app. So again, just to make this hopefully pretty clear, we're starting with SharePoint, right? So we're using this Office 365 SharePoint framework, which allows us to share it externally. So in itself, I've already enabled a collaboration tool for sharing with my customers and vendors using SharePoint, and I could add things like documents and libraries and videos, etc. If you would like to share information from Business Central or any other ERP, our app allows that connectivity using the web services of that ERP, and I'll show you that in Business Central today too. So we're basically allowing you to connect to any of that data in this real-time fashion. So you can think of the portal as being a window into that information. We're not replicating it or anything like that. We're providing a real-time query of the information as it exists in your ERP. Now, depending on my audience, if it's a customer, an employee, or a vendor, I'm going to share different information, right? For customers, it's probably going to be things like orders and AR invoices, etc. For vendors, it's going to be things like purchase orders and payable invoices, etc. And then for employees, we discussed that as well. It'd be more internal facing things like operations and HR information. And now that I have this connectivity, I could tie in all those other Office 365 tools. And again, we'll show you some examples just to get you thinking on what's possible there. But at the end of this, my hope of this next few minutes that we have together is not that we are going to cover a specific example that's going to meet all your needs. It's meant to be more educational, such that you could then take that and say, okay, I understand how this is all working together. Would this be applicable to my company, or how could I use this? Okay, so in preparation for the demo, we are going to go through, like I mentioned, we are going to start basic here. We're going to go through a customer portal, and we're going to focus on sharing orders and invoices, including the ability to do order entry. We're going to switch to a vendor portal, and then we're going to look at purchase orders, as well as the ability to look at shipping details and edit certain things on the PO. And then we're going to skip to a service portal as well as a job cost portal. Service portal is going to be focused more around service cases and things like that. And then the job cost portal will be focused more around open jobs, job status, change requests, subcontractor management, etc. So again, my goal of this next few minutes is to give you as many ideas as possible, such that you leave with an understanding of what's possible. And then, of course, you could apply those concepts to your business. So let's start looking at it. Discard those, and we will go ahead and get rid of Teams and bring up my demo site. So I have, so again, this is Office 365 here. It's just a SharePoint portal, and I have several demos that we're going to look at. And we're going to start with my customer portal. So here, as you can see, I have nothing more than an Office 365 SharePoint site that I have configured to be a customer portal. And here I have some various calls to action, such as the ability for me to see my sales orders, maybe create or edit sales orders, or look at invoices, create returns, create service orders, etc. I'm also giving my customers an ability to manage their company information, update their profile. I've included a Power BI report that's being filtered for this specific customer, so we're only showing data for whoever's authenticated to the portal. A few documents here, they could download a statement of work or a product catalog, and just a events notification here. So again, just all examples to get you thinking, right? This is nothing more than a SharePoint page. If I was an admin, I could edit this page and start changing the lookout, changing the branding, as well as the content. And in fact, to take a little pause on look and feel, if you don't like my layout, I'm not the least bit offended. Microsoft provides examples, right? So they have this whole website that they call the lookbook.microsoft.com. that gives you different templates for creating SharePoint sites. So these are, I guess, the true designers of the world, of which I will not include myself in. And you could look at these templates, and any of them you can say, hey, that looks good, and then click on it and then download that right to your tenant. So if you don't like the look and feel of my sites, like I said, I'm not the least bit offended. You could look at Microsoft's examples, and maybe one of these would be better suited to your company branding, or just to your personal preference or whatever, and you could start with those. Okay, so let's go back to the portal, and let's start, clicking on these action items and seeing what they do. So if I click on sales orders, what's going to occur here, you see that working on it, is it's actually querying Business Central and returning the orders for my customer. And what I didn't show you, but if I were to, launch this in an incognito session so it doesn't know who I am, is I'm authenticated, right? So by going into this portal, it asks me to sign in, of course. By me signing in, I now have an email captured for the portal user, of which that email is going to leverage the contact records of the ERP application to know what customer they are. So now I am showing sales orders for the authenticated customer, and those are being queried in real time. So when I go in there, you saw that working on it, that occurred pretty quickly. It's querying those orders based on who I am and who I'm authenticated as and showing the status. So I could go into any of these, look at the status associated to them, drill into the line items. Maybe I want to drill into this order. Maybe I want to look at the details on the items or the pricing or the tracking information, etc. All of that, of course, is coming directly from Business Central or any other ERP that you're using. As you can note, this integration, or what we call a service, is pretty simple. I'm only showing data. I'm not allowing any edits or anything like that. I'm just allowing them to see their orders from the portal. But you also note there's a print icon here. If I click this print icon, what it's doing is calling the underlying report from the ERP application, and it's going to render it as a PDF in the portal. So now the customer could print their own orders, save them, download them, whatever they're going to do, directly as a PDF that's generated in the portal. So that was the simple one. I generally sort of start simple and then work my way up from there. So let's go look at orders again, but this time I have configured, what we call a service, which is nothing more than an integration to data in an ERP application. But this time I've configured a little bit differently to allow creation and edit capability. So by clicking on that, I'm still looking at the orders within my system, but now I have an edit icon as well as a create icon. So if I were to go through the creation here, what's going to occur is I'm going to put in some basic information. The portal is going to call the business logic of the ERP application, pass my customer details, like my customer ID, and then default with all of the out-of-the-box ERP standard logic, such as my bill to, ship to, etc. So now I've basically, created the beginnings of an order, and I could start going and adding line items associated to it. Those items, of course, are going to query the items that are in inventory that apply to this customer. So I could go ahead and begin adding these items right here directly to this order in SharePoint. So that had create functionality. It also had edit, right? So there was also an edit capability. But we'll keep it moving. Other things that you could see here, create service orders. Maybe I want to allow my customers to come in and create a service order or create a service case. Same type of deal there, right? I now have both edit capability as well as creation. And they could go in there, put some basic details of the order they're creating. It's going to call the underlying business logic and then default all the details for that customer for that order. So is this a good system, if I'm selling like an Amazon type product? Probably not, right? Like I would not suggest this from like a shopping cart, e-commerce perspective. But in a B2B environment, we see it quite often that customers like this type of capability. They're not looking for an Amazon, e-commerce type solution. They're looking for more of a business to business order entry. And this has this. This is going to show your pricing and all the other specifics that are directly configured in your ERP application or Business Central. So that's order creation. Let's keep it moving. Other things, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the vendor portal. I've used a little bit different design here. You can see I have a darker background associated to it. And as opposed to showing customer details, I'm showing vendor details, right? So now I'm showing open purchase orders and things like that, as opposed to sales orders. Same idea, of course, I'm going to click on that. And it's querying the information, again, in a real-time fashion. And now I'm showing the purchase orders for a given vendor. In this case, I haven't given my vendors the ability to create orders, but I am giving them the ability to update like an expected delivery date as well as acknowledge the PO. So they could update certain information in this case just because I've limited edit access just to a couple fields. In addition, I've also included the ability for them to add documentation. So by me clicking that submit button, you can see here, I could go ahead and browse directly to my computer and then pick whatever I want from my downloads and then upload that directly to the portal and include that on whatever PO exists within Business Central. If I click on the print icon here, again, we're going to call an underlying report, right? This isn't a report that we've created. It's just one that we're calling directly from the ERP application. But of course, it's the PO report as opposed to the sales order report. Other options, if I want them to see their invoices. So if I click on this, I'm going to show them their open and historical invoices. I'm not showing a ton of detail here, just the due date and the amount. But if I wanted to, I can include other specifics as well as integrate with payment processors if that was an option or a desire for you. As well as here, I have the ability to do search. That's another type of feature. So if I'm interested in searching information such as POs, I'll go ahead and leave it blank. But I could search data directly from the underlying ERP application as well. So quick pause on how is this all possible, or what is making this occur. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and pick on Business Central here, because that's, I think, most of what you guys are using, and open up a page called Web Services. And this is provided out of the box. I haven't any special license or didn't do an install or anything like that. But what this is a list of all of the pages that I could go ahead and create new ones. So I could go ahead here and say I want to expose a page. And whatever page I pick, I'll just pick, I don't know, locations, sure. Give it a name. And what it's going to do when I go ahead and click this publish icon is it gives it a URL. And this URL is what we use. Oops. Sorry, got click happy there. What we use to communicate directly with the data in BC or any other ERP. So that gives us that capability of that live integration. Then from our portal perspective, it's just a matter of am I allowing read-only or edit, etc. So that's how that real-time integration is enabled. Okay, so keep it moving. So that's a vendor portal. If I were to look at that same thing from a service portal perspective, as opposed to showing POs and things like that, I'm showing service calls, maybe giving my customers the ability to create a service call, just different types of data that I've integrated with, right? Same concepts on each of these, but in this case, I'm creating service cases and things like that, as well as the reports that I've integrated are going to be different. In this case, it's going to be what's known as a call summary report that shows the detail of that service case. So same concept, just different data, different types of organizations that the portal is being used for. Job costing, again, same idea. Here I'm looking at job status, invoices, subcontractors, change orders, things like that. If I go click on any of these, this is looking at a job status report. Again, I could look at the details of this report. I could print it. I could drill into it. Maybe look at actuals versus estimated costs on a job. Go ahead and click the print. Get a percentage of completion report generated. Things like that. As well as if I go, let's go into change orders. That one's a little bit different. Here I have the job number, the divisions, and I could drill into the change orders associated to it and what the impact was to the underlying order. So probably becoming a little bit of a broken record here. Hopefully you guys are getting the idea that really any of that data that exists within your ERP, we are configuring the portal to interact with and then setting permissions on whether or not it should be just displayed or edited, etc. Okay. So let's go back to our slides for a quick second. So the intent of me showing you that is really from a portal, from a very elementary perspective, it's data sharing, right? The idea that someone has to call me or send me an email. Hopefully I'm now giving them this 24/7 self-service access that they could sort of get that information at their own desire whenever they want. If we start getting more into specific, manufacturing processes, then I think, how this could impact the operations of the company becomes a little bit more impactful, if you will. So this is a workflow that we did for one of our customers. They were a manufacturing company and they were using a third-party logistic provider. And in addition to this third-party logistic provider, they wanted to have both a customer portal facing, of course, their customers that's placed their orders, as well as another vendor portal for communication with the 3PL, or third-party logistic provider. So we created a workflow, and obviously, this is leveraging Business Central here, but the order entry came in from the customer. They entered that order in the portal. By them entering it in the portal, it's really already created in Business Central. They decided on how they were going to fulfill this, whether or not it was going to be made or purchased. If it was, of course, made, they created a work order associated to it. The company fulfilled it. If it was bought, then this communication now became a vendor portal, right? So here we have a customer portal communicating the order status, the invoicing, and all the updates of where the order is in the life cycle of the production. And here we had a vendor portal that was communicating the orders and allowing vendors to update things like the expected delivery date. And ultimately what that looks like is, Business Central is serving as the system of record. As I mentioned from the beginning, the portal is more or less a window into that. And we had a view specific to customers showing their applicable data, and then another view specific to vendors, of course, showing their data, which in this case was POs, and for the sake of customers was orders. So let's quick flip back and look at more of a supplier portal. Again, same look and feel. Here a little bit different information, right? Here I'm looking at production orders, inventory, things like that, bill of materials. So I'm looking at it from more of an operation production sake as opposed to just an order entry or a PO system. If I go into inventory, of course, these items are coming directly from BC. I could drill into any of these, look at the order status or whatever fields I've included from those pages that were directly published within Business Central. Could look at production orders, the status of where that production order is, the due date, etc. Drill into this, look at the line items. If I'm communicating more with a third-party logistic company, maybe I want to share my bill of materials, or if there's certain components of the bill of materials that I want to involve their collaboration on, they could come in here and potentially even add items, right, to the or update the quantity associated to it, as well as the status of the bill of materials directly in the portal. Okay, a quick note about the exchange that I'm doing in here, right? As I'm clicking on things and updating things, I mentioned we have the ability to invoke workflow associated to it. And I didn't tell you this, but I do have some workflow associated to some of these. So if I were to go into my email here, here's some of the notifications that I'm getting as I was interacting on the portal. So this was what the vendor updated in the vendor portal. If you recall, I updated the expected delivery date, and I received a notification here of the old and the new date. So this is just a simple email. It could most certainly be, a text message or an approval task. It is using that Power Automate workflow to generate these. So you have a lot of flexibility on the type of notification they're getting. When I generated the service request, in this case, you can see it's requesting for an approval. So this is using a Power Automate approval task. So in order for that service request to be complete, I actually have to approve it from a manager perspective. And then the last one was just a service call I created. So I received a notification of a new order entry being created. So other concepts, so this was, a demo that we did, again, specific to a manufacturing company working with a third-party logistic that wanted to access into their inventory as well as production orders. We also did one for a franchise that happened to be a donut franchise, and they wanted their franchise companies to see their orders and their statuses, etc., as well as have a simple news feed and calendar of events. So as you can see, the sort of use cases are all over the place just because the portal is pretty flexible in the type of information that you want to share. Okay, going back. All right, so moving forward, what I'd like to introduce here is sort of this concept of this business automation that this portal is becoming. And I have some more detailed examples here to walk us through this. But as you can see, the portal, from an elementary standpoint, I want someone to see data. I don't want them to have to call me. I don't want them to have to email me to see the information and have this self-service access. As I start introducing workflow and getting more sophisticated with the Office 365 tools, I can work my way up the value chain and start automating entire business processes. And I have a couple examples here to walk you through to sort of get your wheels turning. But the portal really gets its power, and you're really taking advantage of the Office 365 tools as you start moving your way up this chain, right? So as opposed to just sharing POs or orders or whatever, and not that that's not valuable, but now that you have all that information and you're having people interact with it, you could automate some of those tasks that were maybe done manually previously. So one of my more popular examples is a vendor onboarding. So I'm going to go ahead and request to add a new vendor. That's not good. Oh, well, spell that right? Let's do this. I apologize. Okay, we'll go here. We'll go to this portal and we're going to click down here. I have this request new vendor. So this would be something that an admin would be doing. And on this request for the new vendor, I'm going to put in some basic information. As you can see, this is using Microsoft Forms. So whatever information I want to capture on this request is pretty much up to me. But in this case, I'm just going to put in the name in the email, and I'm going to use my email. So I received this notification and we could see it. And what this is doing is basically kicking off a request for Dynamic Point to be a new vendor in my system, and I'm going to email my contact, AKA me, at that vendor to get this process started. So as you can see, that was just using Microsoft Forms. That could be requested, in different ways. I just put a link to it directly from the portal site, so I have access to it. And if I bring my email over here, what we should see here is I just got a new email that was generated by me completing that request. And this email came from DocuSign. So as I mentioned, with Power Automate, we have all these connectors to other systems. And in this case, I want my vendor to complete a form, but I also want to capture the electronic signatures. So I've integrated that form with DocuSign. So I click this review document. Now I have my vendor completing a contract as well as the W-9 form. So here I just have some simple information that I'm capturing from the vendor, such as their address, telephone number, type of business, etc. I won't bore you with me filling out all this, but I've also captured a W-9 so they could fill this out as well. And most importantly, my reason for integrating this all with DocuSign is so they could include their electronic signature associated and hit finish. So first step, my vendor was requested. The second step is they completed some documentation, and now the workflow will move forward. The next part of my workflow after the vendor does their part is I'm going to route this for an internal review, right? So I've requested the vendor, they sort of fill out their part of it, and now I've sent an approval to a manager in the company saying a new vendor request has been received. And they could go ahead and click that link and look at this completed form and say, okay, the vendor did their part, or yes, we look forward to working with them. I only included a W-9. Obviously, it'd probably be more of a statement of work and things like that. And then I could approve or reject it. And submit. By me approving this, it's going to move forward in the workflow. My approval process is pretty simple. I only have one tier of approval. But what's going to happen is that vendor is actually going to be created directly in Business Central, as well as we're going to share that portal site with them. And then the vendor is going to get a simple invitation. So of course, this email I could have branded. I just made it pretty basic for the sake of demonstration, but it says you're now a vendor in our system. To access the portal, click this link. So by clicking this link, voila, they now have access to the portal. So it took them through an onboarding, capturing some information and contracts to creating their vendor record, as well as inviting them directly to the portal site. I have another similar example. If I were to go to my customer portal, let's go ahead and look at that one. And on my contracts, I believe I have a contract renewal process. So here I have all the contracts coming out of the system, of which have expiration dates associated to them. And I could drill into these expiration dates and look at the contract and whatever details I want. And I have an option to initiate a renewal from the portal. So by initiating this renewal, again, it's going to integrate that with a workflow process. It sends me an email to complete the renewal workflow. Thanks for initiating a request to renew the switch or whatever I clicked on. Please complete the renewal form here, right? So again, inviting them for a simple workflow. By clicking on this renewal, this one I have not integrated with DocuSign, but it's rather a Microsoft form. Simple, right? What's your experience been? What would you like to do with your contract? I'm going to go ahead and renew it. I'll update it to the 23rd and then hit submit. The submission in this case is going to update that contract directly in my Business Central, right? So if I look here, I have the 28th. If I were to keep the screen open here and just do a refresh on it, I would expect to see that that has now updated itself to my new expiration date being September 23rd. So hopefully what that's showing there is, in addition to using the portal for collaboration, you could start involving workflow associated to it and things that you were previously emailing manually. I can now leverage this Power Automate framework and portal as being the basis to automate those processes. So just a quick, look at some other customers' success stories, how people have used this portal. Crooked Marker, so they were the same founder of Buy Brands. If you're familiar with them, they were actually bought out by Dr. Pepper, but they're the drink company. And the same owner started a alcoholic seltzer. So they sell through distributors, and they want their distributors to do orders on the portal. So we created them a order entry portal. Forbes, they're doing a vendor portal, so vendor management, onboarding, invoices, etc. Managing their EFT information is all going through the portal. Rollies, they're a manufacturing company, so they're doing such things as shipment status, unpaid invoices, packing slips, all directly from the portal. Other customers, including McDonald Miller, they're a large HVAC service organization, so they're doing service cases and looking at billing details, all going over the portal information. So their customers use it to place service cases and things like that. So those are just some examples to get you thinking of the different use cases that a portal like this could be used for. Again, why are we doing all this? Obviously from a benefit, self-service, savings. Hopefully we're increasing efficiency and lowering costs while improving our relationships with our customers and vendors. And just really that collaboration of data, right? It's always at their fingertips. Things that we want them to edit, they can. Other data obviously is in read-only fashion, but we're creating that window again into that data specific to the user. This is a concept that I cannot take credit for inventing. Like I said, Microsoft is very much behind the creation of this concept. So they have their own documentation specific to it. So they have building SharePoint portals, SharePoint as an extranet. So Microsoft has included their own, how-to guides on how to do this. And you can most certainly do a lot of what I'm showing without our application. What our app is adding is, again, the ability to pull in that information from the ERP, but that's not always necessarily wanted. Sometimes people just want to do it from a document sharing or content sharing perspective. And again, that's where a lot of this comes into play, is Microsoft leveraging this framework for what was, historically speaking, a more internal facing tool, but now it's being opened up to external partners, customers, and vendors. And that is going to wrap it up for me. So I will go ahead and turn it back to Donna. But otherwise, there's our contact information and our phone number. And thank you, everyone, so much for your time. So Donna, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation and lots of really great features that the portal offers. We have a couple of questions that came in through the chat from Brian. The first one is, we use Notice, PayLink, PayFabric. Would I have the ability to publish a payment link into the customer portal so that the customer can make a payment?
Yes, that's a good one. Notice is actually one that I'm very familiar with. So Notice does have a payment gateway, and they allow us to call that from the portal. And the experience is very similar to if you've ever ordered something from like an e-commerce site that, you know, takes you to PayPal or Stripe or something like that. So any of the payment providers, including Notice, like I said, I am very familiar with that one, have the ability for us to pop a screen and where you're putting that credit card information in their system, right? We're not storing credit card details or anything in the portal, nor is that going in Business Central. It's all going over their system, so it is secure. And Notice is absolutely one that I'm familiar with that provides that functionality. All the big ones actually do. So we've, you know, integrated with PayPal before. Stripe is another one. Authorize.net all have those payment gateways that they allow us to initiate payment from the portal.
Great. And I'll just let everybody know too that if they don't feel like typing their question, they can just hit the little raise hand button, and then I can let you know when you can ask your question. But the next one from Brian is, he said, I'm pretty sure that MS licenses for Power Automate, Power Apps, and Forms. Do I need to license each of the products with Microsoft to use the portals?
Each of the customers or each of the products? I'm sorry, on that question.
Brian, do you want to clarify?
I'm gonna, friends, I mean, I'll assume he's talking about, you know, do I have to license my customers? And the answer is no on that, right? Like I said, anyone that has a email outside of your domain, which includes customers and vendors, is considered an external user in the eyes of Office 365. So they come under this unlicensed account. And really, they're just accessing SharePoint, and the workflow and the underlying things are all occurring internally using service accounts that have been configured. So really, customers are not directly interacting with workflow. Of course, their actions may kick off workflows, but they're not directly interacting with any of the workflow tools, nor are they, you know, logging on the Power Automate or anything like that. They're just interacting with the portal, and depending on what their action does, it could obviously kick off a workflow.
All right. Hi, Brian. Sorry, it's not letting me unmute you. So you might have to just hit the unmute button at the top of the screen yourself to see if that'll unmute. But
Yes.
I can mute everybody, but I can't unmute them.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I just
No problem.
unmuted myself. What I was actually looking for was, do I need to license the Power Automate and those products with Microsoft, like since I'm developing, so I would just be licensing it for myself and not, like, I understand what you're saying about the external users. So we would
Mhm.
just be licensing it for our internal IT staff that's building the Automate and Power Flows?
Correct. I mean, you would need someone who has a license. So, you know, generally speaking, if you go to you know, enterprise plans, that's what most people seem to be running when it comes to Office 365. And if you open up Microsoft's site, you know, it comes with everything that I've shown, right? So here's all their plans on the enterprise level, right? And it comes, all of them, you know, except I guess this one, come with SharePoint. They all come with Power Automate, etc. So most people have it. Microsoft makes it hard just to buy, one of their products in this day and age, right? You buy it's like buying Prime, I guess. Next thing you know, I have, music and TV and everything else, right? And it's very similar for Office 365. Once you're on it, you get a lot of their products with their subscription.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, no sweat.
Great. We have a question from Matt that came in on the chat. It says, on the PO edit/view page from a vendor perspective, there was the ability to update dates on the header, but is it possible to do the same for lines? That's the first part.
So I am going to answer that by showing you, if that's okay. Just because I guess I'm sort of visual myself. But if I were to go into my demo site as an admin, and let's just pick on one like my customer portal, and I have edit access here, so I could go to the configuration screens for the portal. And what we'll see is the portal configuration is nothing more than a URL and all of the fields that I want to include and whether or not I want to make them editable or not, right? So if I go into what we call services, which is again just data, you can see here I have all these various URLs to these. And if I were to click on any of these, so these are coming from different systems, right? Some are coming from finance and operations, some are coming from Navision, some are coming from Business Central. But if I were to click on any of these, you're really just going to see a series of fields that are provided by that page and whether or not I've enabled them for edit, for read only, what do I want on the header, what do I want on the line items, do I want to restrict permissions by users and things like that, right? So I could set up groups and only give certain people access to edit things, etc. So the short answer is yes, but I wanted to show you there. Really, the fields that are available in the portal are the fields that are available on that page in Business Central. And whether or not I put a little E there denotes if that field is editable. So any of those fields, of course, could be editable, not only from a header perspective, but as well as the line item.
Great.
And then I'm sorry, I'm going to ramble. And then I could rename things, right? I could change button labels and drop downs and whatever else to further customize that screen in the portal, right? So if I want to put a drop down or change a title of a button, I could do that too. I'm sorry, go ahead, Don.
All right. Oh, the second part to his question was on sales order entry. Once a customer enters an order, what status does it sit in if he looks in BC?
Good question. So with an order coming in, most people have those come in as quotes, right? Because then they have the ability to transfer it. So even though I've labeled it orders here on the integration to Business Central, in my case, it's actually coming in as a quote. So a customer then has the ability to, look at that, confirm availability or whatever, and then transfer to an order. You could have it come directly in as an order and have it as a specific status, just like you said, if you want that. But a lot of times people like that quote step just because it gives them a separate list of orders coming in from the portal, and then they could review those and convert those to orders before they mix, with all the other orders that are coming in, maybe via more traditional means.
All right. And the last part of the question is, I don't know if we saw it, but is there an item inquiry screen where without entering an order, a customer can view available inventory? And if so, from a configuration perspective, can it be set up to filter out certain locations/bins?
So the short answer is, where did I have that guy? I think I had it on my manufacturing portal. And here's inventory. And I'm querying those items directly from BC to show their availability, right? So that is looking at what I have on hand and statuses associated to it. And then the second part of the question, yes, in the other part of these configurations that I skipped over pretty quick is I have filter criteria as well as dynamic filters, right? So I could do a filter on various fields and clauses and put my own parameters here in the filter, as well as I could do dynamic filters that query something else to determine what I should be filtering by. And my best example of that is, the email. I take an email because that's what they log in as, but then I get a customer ID and then use that customer ID to filter information. So you could also create what we call a system filter, which is basically using some other information to determine the filter and then applying that, if that makes sense.
Great. And we have a question from William. He says, it looks like Microsoft is moving away from SharePoint and towards Teams. Do you think we should be looking to make portals in Teams?
Ooh, that's a great one. So Teams, the little secret of Teams is very much based on SharePoint, right? So with Teams, SharePoint pages, team sites, and everything else actually create underlying, pages in SharePoint directly from Teams. So I have, and I didn't cover it this much today, but I've covered entire demos of the portal directly from Teams. So, and not left Teams at all, and basically did everything that I did today, but used Teams to present it. So there is this interchangeability between the two, which is sort of good news, right? Because if you create a team site in the back end, all the documents, and there's this underlying SharePoint site that gets created. And then by the flip side, if you're creating, SharePoint sites and I want to view those within Teams, you could most certainly do that as well. So there is this interoperability between the two that is pretty cool, right? Because you don't have to quote unquote reconstruct everything for one or the other.
Thanks, Mike, for a great presentation today. If anyone has any more questions on customer and vendor portals for manufacturers or would like a one-on-one demo, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. My contact information is on the screen and you can visit us at sabrelimited.com for more information. Thanks to everyone who attended and we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for watching our videos. Please follow our channel by clicking here to stay up to date with the latest content or click here for more great videos. Don't forget to visit our website at sabrelimited.com. We look forward to seeing you next time.